Thanks to everyone for joining us down the rabbit hole. I'm Trevor Hall.
And I'm Calvin Zeljak. Let's get into it. Welcome into another episode of the Rabbit Hole Sports Podcast, everyone. I'm here alongside Trevor Hall, as usual. Trevor, how are you doing?
I am doing well. Very excited to be back on once again, headed into the new year. Looking forward to a fruitful 2024 for the pod.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better for myself. And we are wrapping up the new year, heading into the new year, whatever way you want to look at it. In a really exciting fashion, we have our first guest on the pod today. It is my good friend and college roommate of 3 years, Sal Garcia. Sal, why don't you say hi? Rabbit Hole Sports debut.
How's it going, you guys? My name's Salvador, if you guys don't recognize, but Calvin and I have actually been friends for a couple years now. Love this guy to death. Honestly, I've never met anyone that talks sports. And Trevor, you're a great guy. I've listened to your guys' podcast ever since you guys have launched it, so I love what you guys do, and I'm excited to start.
Well, thank you very much, Sal. We're excited to have you, and that is very true. This is one of our most dedicated and consistent listeners, and we appreciate that for him.
We sure do.
Him? Who's speaking?
For him, for us, for everyone. We just appreciate
it.
Yeah.
What an arrogant statement that was. It's good for him that he's it's good for us. We appreciate the support. We are thankful. That's the sentiment we want to give off right there. But anyway, we are talking NFL playoffs today. We're going to do so with, I guess you would say, our first segment. I don't know if we've ever actually dedicated a portion of our podcast to a segment with a title. It's just, I was going to say organized chaos, but really unorganized chaos.
Yeah, I mean, it typically, I feel like, is you could say maybe just chaos, which obviously we love here, but I'm glad that we're getting moving towards a more official sort of organized version of chaos, I'd say, for sure. And I love this idea that you have here, so I'll let you introduce it to the folks.
Absolutely. So we are titling this segment Contender, Pretender, and Disruptor. And so what we are going to do, we are going to go through, well, what do we want to do? Do we want to do teams currently holding playoff spots? Do we want to do like top 8 / all the teams still in contention? What are we feeling, gentlemen?
So I'm thinking, if you just look at the NFL.com standings playoff picture, unless there's a particular burning desire to discuss any of the teams that are on the bubble, Texans, Saints, Steelers, Vikings, Bengals, Packers, Broncos, Bears, Falcons, just to very, very quickly run through them. None of them have like amazing odds to make the playoffs. The Texans currently have the highest one of those bubble teams at 47%, but they have it kind of sectioned off by clinched, in the hunt, and then on the bubble. So I figured maybe we could discuss the clinch teams and then possibly the in the hunt teams as well, if you fellas are good with that.
Yeah, that is good with me. And then maybe we'll pick, depending on how long this takes, because there are a couple teams, I mean, not in the NFC, but in the AFC, there are a couple teams on the bubble right now that I think if they got in could potentially do some interesting things. But yeah, I'm good with doing the 7 on each side, and that'll most likely eat up a good chunk of time. Be the very productive time that we're dedicating here today to sports.
It's all about framing. I love that.
Exactly. Perspective. That's what it's about in 2024.
I love it. I'm very excited. Well, shoot, are we just gonna run through it? You want to introduce our first team here, buddy?
Yeah, let's absolutely do it. So I guess I should explain a little better real quick what we're doing. So we're going to label each of these teams we go through as either a contender, that's a team we think is a true Super Bowl caliber team. We would be shocked if they're, not playing for either at least a conference title, if not in the Super Bowl. Pretender is going to be a team where, congratulations, you're in the playoffs. We don't have a whole lot of expectation for you. And then Disruptor is a team that doesn't necessarily have what I would call a concrete definition. It's just a team that we think, hey, this team isn't getting talked about enough, but they get any team on the right day, they could end up making a run that people aren't looking towards. So I think good examples of that would maybe even be like the Bengals back when they made the Super Bowl versus the Rams. Like they weren't really thought of as a legitimate contender until they made that run. And, hindsight looking back, I think it's a little easier to label them a contender just given how far they went. But I mean, that team was 10-7, I'm pretty sure, in the regular season. So I think that's kind of a good layout for them, but all the way to the Super Bowl is no means a requirement. Just someone where we think, like, just for example, not saying I'm predicting any of this, but for example, the Niners or Ravens, the teams that have now clinched a 1 seed, they get this team off a bye or, whatever, whether the weather is bad that day, they can make some noise. They can knock a team out that we view as pretty good.
Gotcha. I am 100% with that.
All right. With that being said, let's just figure out, do we want to start AFC or NFC?
I feel like we should do AFC just with the amount of teams that haven't clinched a spot yet.
I'm good with that, Sal.
Right there with you, Sal. Yeah, let's start off here in the AFC.
All right, let's start from the top, go down. I'd be a little surprised if we don't have a consensus on this team, which is the Baltimore Ravens. Especially after what they did to the Dolphins today and with the 49ers next week, if you haven't been paying attention to them all year, you definitely should be now. The Ravens, in my eyes, are the head and shoulders favorite going into this postseason. Now, I want to make that clear. I don't think they're head and shoulders better than everyone else in the league. I just think based on what we've seen, there's just no way you can deny that they're the team to be looking up at.
Sal, I'll let you go ahead and react to give your take for the Baltimore Ravens here, since you are our guest, and then I'll chime in with my thoughts.
Well, thank you, Trevor. But I honestly believe what Calvin said was right. The Ravens are a guarantee contender when it comes to the Super Bowl. Like, if you think about it defensively, they were able to shut down the number 2 offense in the NFL. The 49ers can literally run against anyone, even pass it against anyone, but yet they were able to shut down Brock Purdy, who was really consistent when it comes to accuracy. Yeah, he throws a pick here and there, but he can still get the game done. But last week, what I saw against him and the Ravens, he didn't get it done. The Ravens were able to shut him down, and if he's able to do that against, or if the Ravens are able to do that against every single team, they're flying through the playoffs.
I agree with that. I do think they have, and Trevor will maybe be touching on this. I do think I don't even know the right word. I think there is a clear formula to beat them. I just think compared to the past few seasons of the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, I think this team, they've shrunk that the window you have to beat them. And that's really by making big plays offensively. That was really what held them back the past few years, was that they were very boom or bust defensively. And a lot of that had to do with Wink Martindale being the defensive coordinator, him being with the Giants now. Huge blitz guy, loves to bring pressure, a lot of really exotic looks. But with that, he's leaving a lot of guys one-on-one on the back end. And I mean, it's kind of funny, and this is a total side tangent, but if you really follow how the Ravens and the University of Michigan have designed their teams schematically, at least since both the Harbaughs have been coaching at those respective institutions at the same time, they're exact parallels. It's really, really insane. So I think the Ravens have they've shrunk their weaknesses, I guess you would say, but there's still a path there. And I want to see if maybe Trevor gets into this a little more.
Calvin, this is a prime example of us being on not only the same page our sports opinions, because I was thinking earlier today, because I was thinking about I was texting another friend of mine about the Michigan game, and I was also looking at the Ravens and doing a little bit of prep for this podcast, and I was thinking about the Harbaughs, and I was thinking about how they are probably the most successful. They've got to be at least a top 3 most successful NFL family of all time. I was trying to think of like who else I might throw in there.
I mean,
Like
the
maybe the
Mannings are, obviously royalty, but I mean,
right, but I think Harbaugh, the Harbaughs in terms of, well, maybe not in terms of the NFL, but maybe just in general, like football, and in general,
oh
maybe
yeah,
even sports. I mean, it's amazing the level that they have brought their respective organizations and programs. And with the Ravens, man, Lamar, I know that. Well, here's the thing. I mean, I don't super want to give the MVP to a quarterback. I think it should be Tyreek Hill. That's my personal opinion.
that was
Uh,
mine for such a long time, and we could probably have a quick MVP discussion at the end of this as well, because I have an interesting perspective on something to do with that as well.
sure, yeah, no, absolutely. But with Lamar, he's still doing what he does in terms of carrying this team. He's thrown for 3,500 yards, and 26 touchdowns. But then he's also ran for 786 yards and 5 touchdowns, which leads the team. So he leads the team in passing and rushing. But he does have legit weapons. Gus Edwards, the Gus Bus. He's got 12 TDs on the year. He's always someone that I think gets forgot about. And then when the
Oh yeah.
Ravens' first 6 running backs get hurt, and then he's always the guy. So
What is
I
what is with that? We need to address this real quick, because the Ravens every season go through what? Every single human on earth playing running
Dude.
back for them at some point, and defensive back too. It feels like their defensive backs and running backs have torn every ligament you can possibly think of.
If their training staff could get their shit together, they would be the greatest dynasty in the history of sports. Like the Ravens somehow pull out just great football after great football despite having, I mean, if this happened to any other team in the NFL, I mean, you see it with the 49ers, right? I mean, they're probably the next team that we are gonna, or well, I guess we're gonna do it by division here. But when we do talk about the 49ers, which I did want to bring up because I think they made it very clear that Brock Purdy shouldn't be the MVP in the NFL. And if Brock Purdy is the MVP of the NFL, I don't see me ever even watching the league again. I can't fathom that. It doesn't make sense. It hurts my brain. It hurts my heart. I don't like it.
I think he definitely had a legit. Well, I mean, again, the MVP is just such a tainted award in terms of quarterback bias overall that, given that circumstance, it makes it really hard to have made an argument against him. But I will say, given Lamar Jackson over the last 2 weeks, free financial advice. Just go bet everything on Lamar Jackson to win MVP right now. Okay? The dude was 19 of 22 for 340 yards and 6 touchdowns today. What?
Dude,
What?
he-
There's no
he-
way he's losing.
you're right. You're right. I think you have to be right about this. And the thing is that the next team we're going to talk about, the Miami Dolphins, if this is a potential NFC matchup, right? If this is a potential matchup to go to the Super Bowl, I mean, we just saw just a dominant performance, and who's to say that the Dolphins might be able to come back if they do play each other again in the playoffs. They might have a little chip on their shoulder, but I mean, they were able to shut Tua down. They were able to shut that Dolphins run game down that's been so successful, and they were really able to lock up Tyreek Hill for only 76 yards, which 6 catches for 76 yards is typically a pretty great game for any wide receiver, but that's Tyreek Hill, So I mean, that's really you're putting the top back on Tyreek Hill, so to speak.
Exactly. And Jalen Waddle was out today, so I mean, there is that. But the bigger thing from the Dolphins' perspective this day, or from this game, is Bradley Chubb, it looks like, probably blew out his knee. So, I mean, that's now Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb that are out for the year. That's your two best edge rushers. And beyond Jalen Ramsey, what else about the Dolphins defense is to write home about at the moment?
I wouldn't say any. I want to just quickly, because it sounds like we're probably going to move on to the Dolphins here. So just quickly, I think all three of us are in obvious agreement that they are for real. They are contenders, Super Bowl contenders.
The Ravens.
Yep.
The Baltimore Ravens, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. So with that being said, are we ready to move to the Dolphins?
I definitely am.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens are guaranteed unless the injuries at them, so.
I would agree for the most part there, yes. So with the Dolphins, let's rotate on who starts. So who wants to take it? We can go to Sal since he went second. We'll just go in a circle.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, with the Dolphins, they were playing a great season of football this year until I saw today with the Ravens. Like, they need to be consistent when it comes to playing their offense, because I feel like they're definitely a type of backyard football team where they kind of just throw deep, and if that doesn't work, they'll hand it off, and if that doesn't work, they're kind of screwed. They kind of don't want to play the short game as much as they used to, and I know you guys probably watch the Dolphins more than I do, but Calvin, you know this a lot when I used to talk when we were in college. Defense is important when it comes to winning football, and with two of their best edge rushers out, I don't think they're gonna have a chance to make it.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that at all, Sal, because I mean, we touched on the defense, and then offensively, it's as much as this is like, and we had an episode that we recorded the day the Dolphins dropped 70 on the Broncos, and we definitely were, in shock and awe, right? But when you really get over that performance, the rest of the year has been a lot more sporadic for them offensively. And the thing that's concerning to me is typically when you think of good red zone teams, you think of being able to get physical, right? Being able to get big and being able to outmuscle people on the goal line. And the Dolphins, you don't think of in that regard at all. And they made up for it very well. They were the number one red zone offense. And to be honest, I don't even know where they stand now, but they have not been as efficient the last two games in the red zone. So I wouldn't be surprised if they have taken a step back in that category. But I think them taking a step back is actually an indication of them regressing to more of their mean in red zone offense rather than just a minor temporary setback, just because personnel-wise, they're not built to be a super great team in the red zone because they are reliant on, well, how do I put this? Because they're not reliant on scheming you up necessarily throughout the whole game, right? Like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you can pretty much just say we're running crossers, we're going deep, and there's a good chance something's going to happen if you just slip up by a step, right? But you get into the red zone, you don't really have that luxury. So they have to scheme people up more in the red zone as opposed to in between the 20s. And normally you see good teams built the other way around.
I think you make an excellent point about their red zone offense. And I also, here's the thing, right? I as much as I do agree with you with the red zone offense, if you look at the schedule, right? You look at the losses for the Dolphins.
Oh, it's all good teams, and the wins are not good teams.
I'm gonna steal a college basketball term here and say out of their 5 losses, 4 of them are I would consider to be like quad 1 losses. Like they're against Buffalo, Philly, KC, and Baltimore. So I mean, like they're against essentially playoff teams or right now borderline playoff teams. I mean, Tennessee, that's a 28-27 kind of toss up there. That's not great, but I mean, you can catch pretty much any team in the NFL has one of those games where it's just kind of, ugh.
And I would argue that game, the way they lost was pretty concerning too, just because they were up 27-13 really with like 4 minutes left and gave up a touchdown 2-point conversion, and another touchdown, and lost the game in the last 4 minutes. And I think that, again, you can chalk up to guys being out. I know Tyreek Hill wasn't playing at the end of that game, but again, you go back to being able, because essentially when we talk 2-minute offense closing out a game, it's, very similar to what we talk about in the red zone. And they just don't have that ability to come at you with something between the tackles and say, we dare you to stop this. And it's just hard because now you're throwing the ball. Now you're needing leverage on the outside. It becomes a much bigger deal to close out games. And I think that eared its head a little bit in that game. And then it gave a little bit of, I don't want to say it gave a little bit of a gaze into the defensive issues, but they had played 3 or 4 pretty solid games defensively before that, and then had played, a solid 3.5 quarters and fell apart in the fourth. And I think that's really indicative of this defense, is that if they are playing a bad offensive team, they're going to be all right. But when teams are really trying to go for it and they're playing elite competition, they don't have the personnel, and, I don't watch enough of their defense to know what they're doing schematically and tell you that they have breakdowns, but there's a lot of guys running wide open. So it feels like there's got to be some breakdowns on the back end in coverage and all that stuff. And I realize we haven't even labeled the Dolphins in either of them, but as much as I would love to label them as a disruptor, just because there is a growing sense of disbelief, I would say, in the Dolphins. I gotta throw pretender on there. I really do. I think Buffalo would get them in the first round. I think if they're the 2 seed, I think Cincinnati. I mean, they already lost to Cincinnati this year, right?
They lost to Buffalo, not Cincinnati.
Gotcha. All right. Well, anyway, I think Cincinnati would pose a problem to them, even in the first round. So, my brother might hate me, and that's all right. He'll get over it. But I gotta go pretender on the Dolphins right now. And maybe I'm selling a little too hard. I don't know. You guys let me know.
No, I would agree. Yeah, they're pretenders.
And
Like,
how much of that is due what they would look like with Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb healthy? That's a whole different discussion, but it's just not the reality of the situation. So I think really when you're looking just at the guys that are going to be available to play in the postseason, that's really where I'm settled on things.
So I'm going to disagree with you guys. I'm going to go ahead and go disruptor.
All right. I can accept that even without hearing the argument. If you went contender, you would have to really do a Jordan Belfort sell me the pen job,
Yeah.
oh yes, that was the most definite. If you chose contender, you would have to explain your reason for that one. But
Well, I'll give you. I mean, I'm almost on the borderline here, and I'll give you this, right. And I totally understand the point. Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Chubb leads the team with 11 sacks. Phillips is right there with 6.5. But the Dolphins actually get their pass rush from a lot of different guys. I mean, Zach Seidler has 8.5 sacks. Christian Wilkins has 8 sacks.
Christian Wilkins is a monster, but I think it's that ability to get penetration off the edge that forces quarterbacks to step up into the middle of the line that I think allows that to work in unison. But again, that's always been a Vic Fangio thing, the D coordinator there. That's who it is. That's always been a thing from him. He gets really good pressure from the interior. He typically gets aggressive play from his safeties, so that can explain back end busts and all that. So, again, I'll let you finish, but that's kind of why I think I wouldn't sit as high on that as you are.
No, I mean, I think I'm pretty much done with the Dolphins here. And I think you raise a fair point that is due to scheme in part, but they do still have Andrew Van Ginkel and Emmanuel Ogbah, who I think I would really trust as like secondary pass rushers, more than most teams' secondary pass rushers. As far as like backup defensive ends and backup outside linebackers and that sort of thing. So that all being said, I mean, I would be a little concerned about a team with like a second good deep ball receiver like a Buffalo or or Cincinnati. Honestly, those are 2 really good ones because they have multiple receivers who can hurt you in different ways. You know, Buffalo less so to me, and we'll get to Buffalo. I mean, spoiler alert.
I
don't
like
really-
Buffalo. I may be sitting where you are in overall feeling, but in that matchup in particular, I feel better about Buffalo actually than Cincinnati.
I mean, yeah, because Gabe Davis has a big game, even if they take Diggs out, and then they can run the football pretty decently. I mean, I think it's pretty much over. So, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go Disruptor for the Dolphins, and then if you fellas don't mind, I'll go ahead and take the Browns right now, because they're the next team in the AFC that's clinched.
Absolutely.
Go right ahead.
I'll just go on record right now and say, this is cute, right? This is a cute team. Joe Flacco, it's adorable, little old guy throwing the ball around. It's fun. I get it. And he's had some really good games for them, and against maybe all odds. Is he elite? We may never know, but
That question refuses to get answered, mainly because every time it looks like the answer is yes, he's not in the league anymore. And then every time it looks like the answer is no, he, is coming off the couch throwing for 350 yards.
and he's better than Deshaun Watson for sure. So I mean, bang for your buck wise.
Yeah, no, and from a bargain standpoint,
Yeah.
as elite as it gets.
Here's the thing, right? I mean, I think it's really matchup dependent. And if they had even, if they had a Nick Chubb, if they had I mean, I guess technically they still have Kareem Hunt, but like, who cares? Sorry, Kareem. You know what? I'm not sorry, Kareem. He's kind of a dick. Jerome Ford, he's been good for them as 5th round rookie out of Cincinnati, 800 yards, 4 TDs. I mean, that's a decent rookie season for sure. But when you think about their receiving threats, I mean, Amari Cooper and David Njoku, those guys have been good. Elijah Moore, I know, just got out of the hospital on Friday, but he's in concussion protocol, so I'm assuming out for next week.
Very scary situation there.
Absolutely, yeah. Wishing him the best. But it's the defense, obviously, that you got to talk about. Myles Garrett, definitely a player of the year, defensive player of the year type season for him with 14 sacks. He's been really, really a big time disruptor. But yeah, I just, I like their defense a lot. I like Za'Darius Smith. I like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and not just because his name's fun to say. He's a very versatile, sort of in the box safety / linebacker for them.
Absolutely.
Play all over the field, and then I mean, they have decent corners. So yeah, I mean, it's really, it's guys like Denzel Ward and Martin Emerson out there on the edge. So it's really going to be really heavily matchup dependent for them. Super difficult call right now. I think if they play the Chiefs and they keep the ball like out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, that would be an upset that I would be down to watch. I think they'd pummel the Jaguars only to get pummeled by whoever they played next. I think that'd probably beat the Colts as well. The Bills and Chiefs, it's like if you could shut down the passing game, but even then, that it's tough. But I mean, I don't see them. I guess I would say I don't think they have the offensive firepower, honestly. I don't think they do. I'm gonna have to go Pretender. I mean, I'm gonna have to go Pretender. And I'll let you guys.
Yeah, I'm trying not to. Well, no, I'm trying not to let because I got a lot of respect. I think Kevin Stefanski is probably hands down coach of the year in the NFL. I don't know if anyone would argue with that at this point.
I think that's super fair. The job that he's done with the absolute, I mean, Deshaun Watson with his whole in and out thing, and then not even being with the team, and it seemed like there was almost like a Kawhi Leonard in San Antonio situation where he was like kind of mad at the medical staff for a while. I mean, that was really strange. So for him to kind of deal with that, basically, and get away from there really cleanly and still have a really good season. I mean, Joe Flacco started for 1,600 yards and 13 touchdowns, and is, I mean, holy shit, it's Joe Flacco. I mean, what? Yeah, sorry.
There's no bigger what the heck is going on story in sports right now than Joe Flacco. Absolutely not. It's crazy what he's doing. But with that being said, the Browns to me, in a lot of ways, embody what I picture a disruptor being. And for that reason, I got to label a disruptor. But I will say, the reason I brought up the Kevin Stefanski point before that is I'm trying not to let my liking of the story of what the Browns have done this year be driving my perception of them up. But with that being said, I think the way they are built on being a defensive team, and even though Joe Flacco is having a great, whatever it's been, 5, 4, however many games he's been quarterbacking them so far, he's obviously been playing phenomenal. But I would agree that the Joe Flacco being the reason the Browns win in the playoffs seems like a fairy tale sort of reach to me. Now, I'm rooting for that. Absolutely. I want to make that 100% clear. Joe Flacco can throw for 400 yards in every playoff game. Browns win the Super Bowl. I wouldn't be mad at that in the least. That'd be one of the greatest sports stories of all time, and we'd get to witness it, and it'd be amazing. But I'm not betting on that happening. But with that being said, I think the fact that they are a really sound defensive team, they're going to be physical against the run, which is going to even more emphasize things or make them look even better, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in the postseason, where you typically see teams kind of trying to slow the game down, trying to control time of possession, kind of that old school mentality. Football comes back a little more where teams aren't as aggressive consistently throughout the game. Offensively, there's a little more play calling from an offensive standpoint to protect the defense. I think that's something the NFL and NBA really share, is that the regular season, you see a lot more pace, a lot more up and down the field, up and down the court. And then you get into the playoffs and it's a lot more of kind of the gritty old school styles that I guess we were used to, but even like if you're older than us, like really grew up watching, where, maybe the physicality isn't at the same level, but at least in terms of how the play calling is structured, how the game is structured, the playoff style is very similar to more like early 2000s, if that makes sense. So with that being said, I think the Browns style fits super nicely because of those reasons going into the playoffs. And because of that, I think they're a great example of a disruptor. But again, if your reasoning, if anyone out there is sitting there and is saying, I agree with you, Calvin, I like what you're saying, they are a disruptor, but it's because Joe Flacco is going to have a great postseason, I don't buy that. I don't buy that. Again, rooting for it, want to emphasize that. Absolutely rooting for Joe Flacco to have the greatest postseason in NFL history. That would be amazing. Would love to witness that. That'd be something I'd tell my kids, right? Because it'd be all over NFL Network all the time. They'd be like, remember 40 years ago when Joe Flacco threw for 2,000 yards in the playoffs and 12 touchdowns, right? My kids would be like, who even is that? And I'd be like, let me tell you a story.
Anyway, tell you about a QB from Delaware.
Yeah, a little guy from University of Delaware. He was elite, and he was always elite. People just didn't want to admit that.
He surely was.
No, but anyway, I'll wrap up my point and get it to Sal here. I think the Browns are a disruptor, but I think it's going to be because the style of their team meshes really well with how the style of game goes when you get into the postseason, which again, very similar NFL, NBA in that regard. In that regular season, a lot more aggressive play calling from an offensive standpoint, or a lot more pace. If you want to look at it in that regard, I'd say football, you'd probably look at more aggressive play calling. Certainly teams, I feel, play with tempo more in the regular season, but I just feel like pace is more of the thing to emphasize for basketball. But point being, defense is what it comes back to in the playoffs. And I think because of that, the Browns have a good shot to potentially win a game we think they have no business winning. But with that being said, I think you make a great point, Trevor, that as soon as they do that, I don't think it'll go further from there. So
Well, I feel like I'm gonna get this short and sweet when it comes to the Browns, you guys. Congratulations to the Browns. I mean, they made it to the playoffs finally after 2016. Like, congrats to them. Stefanski, he's a great coach. He's able to do everything without like all his weapons. I feel like the prime example of a coach to use the weapons that you have and able to succeed. So yeah, he's able to make the playoffs, but they're pretenders. I'm sorry, they're going to be pretenders. When I think of the Browns this year, I think of the Browns this year as the 2012 Broncos when Tim Tebow beating the Steelers. They're going to probably win one upset game and then get eliminated in the semifinals. Like they're not going to make farther than that. They don't have the offensive power for this. They'll probably get close in the first round, probably lucky in the second round if they're able to keep up and have a somewhat of a poor defensive team against each other. But they're not going to the Super Bowl. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't think they're going to the Super Bowl. I think they could potentially win 2 playoff games and get to the AFC Championship. I think that's the ceiling.
I like Sal's take of the Tim Tebow Broncos squad. I think that's a really good take. I think they could have a nice little surprise. Oh, remember when Joe Flacco had that run? But they're not. I don't. If they win 2 games, I'll be floored. I'll be
I don't
floored.
know, man. I mean, were we not feeling the same way about the Browns when they made it to the playoffs with Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, but I also have. I mean, I don't want to make it biased, but I have a love-hate relationship with Joe Flacco because he beat the Niners in the Super Bowl in 2012. But
All right, fair
he's
enough.
a great quarterback. He's a great quarterback. I can admit that. He is a great quarterback.
You know,
he's listen, man. Joe Flacco was playing when Polamalu and he's going up in practice every day against Ed Reed. The way DB is playing out, this is nothing to him. This is absolutely nothing. You know what? Now I'm really rooting for a little 400 burger from Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco.
I would like to see it. I would like to see it. And Sal, I just want to correct you on one thing. Joe Flacco did not beat the 49ers in that Super Bowl.
He did.
No, that was the power in the Mercedes-Benz Dome.
All right. I always have that discussion with other fans. Yeah, I would say the power definitely made the defeat on that.
The Niners had all the momentum before that went out, man. I just I'll never quite let that go. I was really rooting for Jimmy Boy in that one, but
yeah, I bet it was the power that allowed a 109-yard kickoff return.
Ooh, fair. Okay.
Just kidding. It was Jacoby Jones. He was nice.
All right. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Jacoby Jones. Shout out. He's a good random player.
Gosh, it was Anquan Bolden though that had a heck of a game, I think, as well. No,
dude. Not to get off on a tangent here because I know we're trying to be structured today, but I love Anquan Bolden so much.
Right,
he was so freaking good.
Underrated receiver all time. Just gonna say it now.
I think you're right about that, Sal. I mean,
I don't
know.
Larry Fitzgerald. The fact that they were just kind of like sitting over in Arizona for so long, like God had to intervene and be like, I'm going to randomly make the Cardinals make the Super Bowl one year just so people have a little recognition of these 2 great players.
Dude, he had to resurrect Kurt Warner a second time.
Right. Crazy.
Yeah. Just to give him some acknowledgement. Jeez.
It's wild. I mean, the Cardinals franchise could be a whole separate discussion that I, think very few people are interested in having. But
look,
we'll
I'll talk about Larry Wilson all day. Don't get me started on old number 8.
I'll keep defending Cliff Kingsbury. I don't care.
Look, you know what? Never mind. I don't want to have that conversation.
I'm Trevor Hall.
And I'm Calvin Zeljak. Thanks for joining us.
Down the Rabbit Hole.
That concludes part 1 of this episode. Whether you're listening on YouTube or Spotify, thank you so much, and make sure to check back tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for part 2. If you need more content from us, head on over to rabbitholesports.com. We have all our links to our social media up there, as well as our blog and our newsletters. Thank you so much for joining us down the rabbit hole.